Thank you, Shane. Amazing. City Art is sponsored by the Salt Lake City Arts Council, Utah Arts Council, Zoo Arts and Parks, X-Mission, and audience donations. And of course, we're always grateful for the best library in the world here in Salt Lake that we get to do our readings at week in and week out. And we're going to have AJ Martine. So glad. It's been a long time. 6 years, something like that. I'm so glad to have you back. He's a Western-born man, which is clear, raised by a Barrel Ranch family in southwestern Colorado Plateau. The Plateau is character, protagonist, villain, and flinty, indifferent but demanding lover that features in much of his writing. We'll find out tonight. In hindsight, he says that doing things the hard way wasn't a good business model for living, but it did give him a lot of experiences to mine for his storytelling. His fiction, poetry, and creative nonfiction have been published in Rocky Mountain Review, Catalyst Magazine, Salt Lake Magazine, Outside Magazine, Wazzee Street Literary Magazine, University of Idaho Press, and Glimmer Train Press. And he's earned awards in first place in the Utah Society of Professional Journalists for his investigative essay, Tracking Dust. Just so glad to have AJ Martine reading for us tonight.
Thank you all for coming. You know, I didn't get this all by being completely stupid. Following up an act like that, I probably ought to just sit down. One more time. I took a lot of courage to say that because I'm going to get hell when I get home over that. But it's actually I don't know, I've never read with Shem. We've talked a lot about writing. She's been one of my muses, she and other people in this room. And she's edited a lot of my crap and made it look like not crap. But it's a privilege. It's amazing when you share something with somebody you live that's this intimate. So thanks. And Joel, thank you. Every Wednesday night, Joel shows up here, I think, don't you? 3 a month. You know, Joel has done more probably for the literary world, at least in Salt Lake City, than anybody else. And Joel, thank you for that. And for all of you out there, thanks for coming to these. It's great. Everybody knows Joel's a poet, right? And if you don't, I like Joel's poetry. I want to read just 5 lines from one of your poems before I start going, shut up. Shut up. I don't want to read my own stuff after that. I don't want to go to my own stuff. It comes from a book, Winged Insects. The name of this poem is Iguana Knows Your Voice. The iguana knows your voice. He is roaming in the houseplants, sunning himself among leaves. With pearls on his jaw and tail like a noose wrapped in foil, he wouldn't seem real if he had moved his head slow as an orchid blooms. Isn't that amazing? It's amazing poetry. So, I'll procrastinate enough. Thank you, Joel, for having us. Some of you in this room, many of you in this room, have been a part of what I'm going to read for about 10 years, frankly. This part of this story started in California when some of the people in this room were with us on holiday, and I told a story that will be part of this, and Lynn said, what are you going to do with that? You know, cowboy, hell, I don't know. So here we are. Joan's got a whole file she told me a while ago with this stuff in it, and she meant a lot of help to me, so. And of course, everybody else. So basically what this is part of a novel, hopefully. My protagonist is having some serious mental issues, which you could say maybe I modeled after somebody at the podium. He moves to a small southern town, kind of halt the erosion, the slow the erosion down. He goes there with a cat who has 6 claws in each paw, and a storefront mannequin named Hannah. He picked Hannah because she introduced herself in Latino, the Judeo-Spanish that my protagonist grew up speaking. And he also needed a model to do some oil painting if he ever got around to it, because his therapist told him it would delay his psychosis. But he has weird blackouts. He remembers everything he hears when he's down on the ground, but just can't move. Right after he moves to that town, he meets some of the people and realizes that both those who grew up there and never left, and the recent immigrants to town, didn't stay or move there to hold back madness. It was because the alleged magnetic resonance of the area made batshit crazy comfortable and invisible except to Moshi. Within a few weeks, he knew by comparison to the residents that his paranoia, depression, and delusional thinking made him the sanest person in town. It's called the trajectory of vegetables. This is the part of it that you heard. So I'm going to say some things in Ladino. It's Judeo-Spanish. We're great at proverbs. We don't ever follow them, but we're great at them. And this first one is, Cuando Ganatín está acreedado, que el cañón está siempre abierto. It reads, while the Garden of Eden may be closed, hell is always open. Okay. The morning of Diane's two predatory and ill-mannered children started the fire that burned Truman's wheat field and their mother's chicken house. Moshi, al cantar, Abravanal, de Vega, woke up feeling healthy and happy. Odd, a rare event. Most days upon awakening, Moshe was astonished and often chagrined that he hadn't died, that his heart hadn't exploded in the night. Muerte te quedó bien, Hannah said from the other room. Remember the mannequin? In Ladino. And she said, death, I shall always love you. Moshe rolled his eyes. Truth is better than fiction, I guess, he said. A few weeks after moving to a small town in the midst of an early morning anxiety attack, he wondered, how would he know he had died if knowledge and memory of living snapped off at the split second of death? As the frontal cortex went mushy, would rebel cells in the amygdala record the event just in case it was a false start? And at the last second, just before he stiffened, would it plug in the bright lights of a near-death experience? After worrying about having died in his sleep and being jerked back, and before he got out of bed the next morning, Moshe lay worrying that he would have one of his peculiar blackouts in the garden. He would revive with ants exploring the jungle of hairs in his ears, or worse, wake up with a muddy crotch because he had wet himself during the experience. You're going to worry yourself to death, Hannah told him. Your thoughts are twisted like an Escher painting on the Moibus Railroad. But the morning of the fire in Truman's Field, those thoughts did not intrude or subvert the feeling of exhilaration and euphoria of waking alive. Moshe rolled out of bed, stretched. He dressed and tapped his right boot 3 times and the left one twice on the floor. His bedroom, 5, a prime number, an important number to start such a great day. Hey, sunshine, don't forget to check your pulse, Hannah said, as he dressed. Moshe looked through the wall. She was standing next to his desk in a modest yellow dress. It was silky new because he had bought it for her. Moshe probed his wrist, 51 beats, no syncopation, no precoronary chest tightening, another prime number. Sunrise the day of the fire was rare as well. That morning, 5 hours before the fire, diffused pastels tinted the rock bluffs. Venus rose shining like a flake of clear quartz. No wind, air cool, sharp, clear. Small birds tended to the morning chores of their tribes. No dust from yesterday's wind, no haze drifting across the Colorado Plateau from the coal-fired electric plants. Besides, 2 nights a day worried about mercury and SO4. Words to describe the scene, his feelings, but his therapist said he should try to engage more often. Piled behind his lips like water behind Glen Canyon Dam. It was trapped verbal art. Finally he said, beautiful, just fucking beautiful. Unfortunately, his first cigarette of the day, Figaro, his cat, leaped to the railing. Moshe glanced at the trees along the ditch, willows, cottonwoods, a rope, Russian olive. No Diane hiding in the thickets watching him. Across the field, Moshe saw a spark, a flicker of fresh sunlight from the upstairs room of her chicken house. Diane had been stalking him, hiding in the trees along his ditch, watching him from her two-story chicken house with surplus World War II binoculars. The day before the fire, he had spotted her hiding in the cattails across the pond where he fished. She had submerged herself so only her head above her nose showed. Discovered, she rose from the muddy water, her body reed thin and pale white, moss and pond slime dripping from her chin and small hard nipples. Nesting birds flushed from the reeds in panic. Why don't I have nipples? Hannah asked. Moshe shook his head to clear the cracks her voice burned in his mind. Paul's probably waiting at the cafe for his fake therapy session, Hannah said. Say hello to Becky for me when you see them. I can, Moshe said. A couple of weeks ago, Paul's car was sideswiped by a dust devil, and his inflatable doll and a blue tarp were sucked into the air. She disappeared. Paul said that the resurrection had happened, and his inflatable doll, Becky, was the only righteous one taken up. Across the field, Moshe's field, in Diane's house, no one knew in town that her boys were filling a bag with bottle rockets and other incinerators ready for a day of mischief. Shit, Moshe said, thinking about Paul. The wonderful start to a rare day, no thoughts of exploding hearts or blackouts, cosmic disequilibrium was starting to fade back to a haze of heat, normal paranoia, and serious depression. Moshe hated the locals who invaded his seclusion. His brain was fractured in long fault lines etched by years of untreated PTSD and a genetic propensity for depression and guilt. The locals believed that he was a psychiatrist. The label had been assigned probably after Paul, the town's most out-of-the-closet public drunk, overheard Moshe mumble to himself that Stonyfield was a fenceless, insane asylum filled with free-range wackos. At least somebody from Stonyfield would drive to his home. But at least weekly, somebody from Stonyfield would drive to his home or take him aside in a corner cafe. Winslow Herman Bean, the 11th, nicknamed Skeeter, shared one day that his son would have been Winslow Herman Bean, the 12th. Social services hadn't taken him away to live with Skeeter's uncle and aunt. They adopted him and named him Alan, Skeeter told Moshe. The Mormon bishop, who was also the deputy county sheriff, stopped Moshe walking along the road on another day, took off his cowboy hat and mumbled, "Wonder if I could ask for your opinion." The deputy was named Quick Draw McGraw because his sidearm had fallen from his holster one Sunday morning, putting him round to the only stained glass window in south central Utah. Moshe shook his head yes, hating himself for not being able to say no. "You're a pushover," and it gloated in his head. "Up yours," Moshe said out loud. "I'm sorry," Quick Draw said. "Oh, nothing. I didn't realize I'd spoken," Moshe said. Hannah giggled in his head. Moshe bent his head to one side and slapped it like he was clearing water from his ears. The bishop looked around puzzled at this behavior. "Oh," he said, "I get it. You're joking with me like other people do. But between you and me, when I need some private time to talk to myself about my depression, because I can't tell anyone else whether they'll replace me at the ward or at the department, I like to go to this one spot in the desert. I follow a small game trail made by jackrabbits through the cedar." Moshe stared at the deputy, trying to see through him. "One of the trails shoots straight at the edge of one of the cliffs and doesn't stop. So one day I laid on my belly," the deputy continued, "and I looked off the edge. It's about 300 feet high. I was looking for piles of rabbit bones. There weren't any that I could see. But my question is, do you think I'm crazy for thinking that instead of killing themselves like lemmings, that at the last minute, after they launch, the jackrabbits learn to fly through the veil to wait for the final resurrection?" Moshe blinked his eyes, shrugged his shoulders in absolution. And even Moshe's therapist in Salt Lake City would turn the conversation, asking Moshe his opinion on personal things. The day Moshe met Dr. Rabinoff, Moshe asked him, "So you're Jewish?" "No," Dr. Rabinoff said, "I'm Mormon." "Do you think that's weird?" "Does sound like a conflict of interest," Moshe said. But the morning of the fire, Moshe stood on his porch taking a last drag on a cigarette. As he stretched, a sparrow hen zoomed around the corner of his house and struck Moshe on the second button of his shirt. Figaro, the cat, startled by Moshe's sudden movement, fell off the railing head first. Moshe looked over the railing in time to see Figaro hit head first, 6 feet below in the flower garden. He looked at the cat in the garden and the sparrow hen at his feet. The cat looked like an expanded accordion dropped straight down on its end. Collapsing around his core, Figaro tipped over onto his back, stared up at Moshe. The 6 claws on each paw were in sheath, and the fine hairs on his pale belly rippled in the morning light. The hen was gasping for air through a bent beak, still full of bug larvae. Moshe shook his head, stepped off the porch to walk into town. "What happened?" Hannah asked. "I can't explain it," Moshe said. His mood was getting darker. A few hundred feet from his gate on the highway, Moshe stopped. There was a humming sound floating down in the light breeze. He looked upward, puzzled at the spiral of black motes high above town. "It's the 1,000 megahertz power pyramid that the New Agers in town claim is floating above the town," he said aloud. "It's probably been raining stupid for decades, which explains a lot." But his vision cleared, and he made out circling crows and ravens. There were hundreds of them riding the morning thermal. He could just hear their raucous calls that sifted from the sky like fire ash. Moshe watched the Corvette circle, seemingly captured by the vortex. Even without binoculars, he could tell that the crows were circling clockwise in the core of the convection, while ravens soared counterclockwise rotations around them at the edge of the thermal. "I'll be a son of a bitch. It's a whirlwind of dark," Moshe said. "Hannah, too bad you're homebound. You should see this." "Cualquiera quiere tener ojos." Moshe shrugged his shoulders in resignation at her questioning why a blind person might want eyes. He watched the corvids for several minutes, then 3 birds peeled off and circled back, flying against the current of birds. Then they seemed to hit a wall and fell. The threesome knocked the 4th out of orbit. They joined in a free fall. The black specks didn't flare, nor did black wings cup to catch air to play like chutes. Instead, they tumbled, wings flaccid. They hit the ground in small explosions of dislodged red soil. Puffs of black feathers swirled. Moshe shook his head, looked up at the spinning black cloud. "Shit," Moshe thought. "It just rained birds." Then Moshe fell face down into the red dirt. He was having one of his weird blackouts. Moshe's brain replayed the fall of the birds, could see that their feathers were not just black, but iridescent like the carapace of some beetles. The bluish sheen of their black feathers became brilliant blue, almost the color of what he thought radiation would look like if it fluoresced. After a few minutes, Moshe staggered to his feet, wiping off red soil from his jeans and shirt, and straightened the brim of his cowboy hat. He walked to the birds that had smacked the earth 20 feet from him. He circled them like a coyote, sniffing at dead sheep looking for traps. Without touching them, he knew they were dead. Moshe wondered if it had spells like his had fallen. He wondered if their spells had triggered his. As he approached the highway, still groggy from his episode, he wondered if he had really seen corvids fall. A female mallard, wearing brown nesting feathers, flushed from her nest of speckled eggs, flew up squawking and slammed against the side of a motorhome. Grievously hurt, it fluttered over the barbed wire fence and did a head-over paddle feet landing in Moshe's field. Feathers scraped off by her impact stuck to the side of the motorhome for a second and then fluffed into the crystal air. Another puff of feathers flew from each point of impact on the ground until she quit bouncing to clumps of grass. The hen stood, shook her feathers, shit, waddled a few steps, started to voice her displeasure, and then collapsed. Moshe could tell she had died mid-squat. What a bad way to die, Moshe thought. just so you have a real reason to be mad, you crap, and then only then, when you get a chance to scream out the first part of a complaint, you die. It's a bad day for birds, he said under his breath. At the cafe, Moshe ordered a carafe of coffee. Diane gently touched his hand when she handed him a cup. He walked out to sit on the deck, relaxing, trying to puzzle out what was turning into a strange day. But Moshe hadn't seen Paul in the cafe. Paul came out to the cafe holding a cup of coffee in his left hand, trying simultaneously with his right hand to pull up his pants, light a cigarette, and wave at Moshe. Moshe was trapped. He knew he should have jumped up and started walking home when Paul came out of the cafe. Paul was easier to deflect when you were in motion. The easy morning and his good mood sifted into the parking lot. Milk curdled in Moshe's stomach. Paul waved at Moshe even though he was close enough to shake hands. His fingers were long and pale, quite like fresh-born cave newts, or like they'd been grafted onto his grime brown hands from an albino piano player. His hands made symphonic motions, but his fingers squirmed and swayed to another rhythm so that his waving hands resembled Medusa's hair. Even clutching a cup of coffee or a whiskey bottle, his fingers wiggled, trying to break free, each trying to sign in its own language, a melange of gibberish, separate syntax that long ago faded with desiccated parchments. Paul's cowboy hat was worn and soiled, matching his shirt, jeans, his neck and the palms of both hands. A gauze bandage poked out from under the brim of the hat. "Why do you have your head wrapped?" Moshe said. He shuddered, bewildered that he'd asked a question he didn't want an answer to, chagrined that he hadn't excused himself and walked away. "Zucchini," Paul said. "Goddamn zucchini flew right down and smacked me on the head," Paul told Moshe. "Hey, you know you have a bird feather stuck on your shirt?" Paul waved his hands in wide circles, trying either to balance on his feet or to explain the terminal velocity of vegetables in tail flight. "You remember that doll of mine, Becky?" Paul said, forgetting his current story about vegetables. "She got blown out of my car 2 weeks ago." Moshe couldn't keep up. He'd already heard the story. He frowned, rubbed his head in confusion. Moshe squinted his eyes shut. "A dust devil whirled out of Truman's Field," Paul said. "It was aiming at us. I had just bought a new dress in Salt Lake." Moshe wondered what had happened to the dress and how strong, and if her perfectly molded round O-shaped mouth finally had a reason to stimulate real surprise. "What does zucchini have to do with it?" Moshe asked, his hands in an orbit around each other, trying to hurry the point. "I was up in Salt Lake, got knocked on my ass by a flying zucchini." "Squash?" Moshe repeated, shaking his head in a wise manner, had known the variety of squash clarified and settled the issue. "I'm a dumb shit maggot," Moshe said to himself. "That first zucchini splattered down on the sidewalk between me and a stray dog," Paul said, "and about that time another one came out of the sky and smashed me on the head. It knocked me to the ground and I chipped a tooth." The town fire alarm went off. "Thank God," Moshe said. "I'm saved." He hitched a ride with a deputy who had been having a Diet Coke in the cafe. They arrived at Truman's Field, but the fire, started by Diane's boys, had already raced through the wheat field. Most of the residents were standing in the field leaning on shovels. Diane's chicken house was in full blaze. She was running around the structure screaming and throwing fists of dirt at the conflagration. The smell of burning chicken poop permeated the air. Then she saw Moshe and ran across the field towards him, sobbing, calling out his name. Paul turned to him and said, "Them squash were being launched by some kids with a potato cannon. They'd been attacking people for days, according to the police." Moshe's brain reeled, and for the second time that day, he fell face forward having a blackout. He could hear the paramedics grabbing kids and arguing about diagnoses even before they had reached Moshe. The ash was plugging his nose. "I hope they leave me alone," he thought. "I don't want to be killed by their good intentions. Their track record with injuries along the highway is dismal." Diane reached him first, rolled him onto his back, and stomped her foot and yelled at the paramedics, "Leave him the hell alone. I'll take care of him." She plopped down next to him and cradled his head in her lap. She brushed ash from his hair, wiped his nose with a tenderness that Moshe hadn't felt in years. "Watch out," somebody yelled, pointing at a dust devil accelerating across the burning field straight towards them. Diane looked up and then, dropping Moshe's head back into the ash, stood between them and the whirlwind. She pointed a finger to the vortex, stomped her foot and yelled, "You turn away and don't you dare hurt my man." The dust devil stopped a few yards away and then turned its course heading for the embers of her chicken house. Moshe had recovered but was watching all of this through his eye slits, pretending to still be under the spell of his event. As the whirlwind turned, Paul's doll floated out of his whirling dust and spun tumbleweed and came to rest in the ash. Her dress was intact, and her mouth was still looking surprised. Paul stumbled across the field, waving like he was greeting a train. Several weeks prior to the fire, Moshe, looking through his bedroom window, had thought, "Stars waste away like humans, burn out." But some stars collapsed, and some stars, he had read, burned out, shrunk, then exploded. He thought, when stars explode, is it old age, cosmic disease, or perhaps an ambush by a rogue and suicidal star seeking a like-minded companion for an ending? Does the stardust form rings like those on a cut-off stump, a cellular chronicle of responses to the influence of invisible things beyond our orbit, gravity, dark matter, randomness? Maybe, Hannah said. The rings of stardust were used by dead artists to paint halos around the heads of saints and baby Jesus. Other stars burned out, expanded, and then he thought, after they said fuck it, collapsed into super dense, crusted balls and fell into a black hole somewhere in time. With his head in Diane's lap in the burned field, he watched Paul bring his doll back to the road, brushing her grass. "It's polyester, but it feels like silk," Paul said. Moshe was having a strange reaction to Diane's tenderness and remembered the rest of his thought about collapsing stars. He had thought, when abandoned love explodes your heart, do the shards build a hard crust around what's left of your hope, making it harder for love to drill very deep?